So I'm
Sorry.
going to start reading through the roll call.
Yes, the roll call now that the meeting's being recorded.
Yeah. So if you're here, please just let me know. You can just say present or you can say here. First on the list is Andy Leonard. Next is Tabiti Lewis.
I think Tabiti typically joins us around 1:30. Is that correct, Anya? Sorry, Joy. Keep going.
Okay.
No, sorry, everyone. I was trying to find how to unmute my unmuting thingy, and my, the cursor was just like not cooperating. So yes, you're right, Molly. Sometimes he joined us a little later.
Okay, I'll just take note of
Sorry,
that. When
go
he comes
ahead.
in. Yeah. Next is Adrian Livingston.
Here.
Okay. Christina McMahon. I think Christina said she's going to be a little bit late today because she has a meeting at 1, but she might join in a little closer to 2 p.m. And next is Raphael Miller.
I'm here.
Okay. Molly Rogers.
I'm here.
TV Wilson. And Sam Cole.
Sam is here.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks, everyone. Back to you, Molly.
Thank you. And thanks for the attendance today, everyone. I think I see Kiwi on my screen. And so hopefully didn't come off mute, but is able to hear us and listen to us. So the very first thing I really want to do is welcome everybody to the June meeting of the Juvenile Justice Subcommittee. And we have a variety of things today to talk about. And we're going to start with kind of some critical ones because we have a full YDC meeting coming up on Thursday, and we're going to be doing a presentation to the full YDC on the funding. And so, Anya, I'm going to ask that you take it away with the 2023-2025 JCP County plans. And if we can share screen the smart sheet. I just want to take a moment and thank all of the counties. I had the opportunity to review the ones that I was assigned, but I also just then read some of the other ones and just felt like lots of work went into the plans, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. So, Anya, do you want to take it away?
Sure, thank you, Molly. Joy, would you mind putting up the smart sheets? And I don't know what's our capacity to show the whole smart sheet, but those of you who had the distinct privilege of working with them know that they're pretty extensive. And joking aside, I really, really appreciate your willingness to work with them and help us through the process. So just to recap how the plan review went. So each of the 36 counties, and we will talk about county plans at this point, and then I can see that Juliet and Anna has joined us from NPC Research, and then we'll switch to tribal plans after we conclude discussion about county plans. But I also asked Juliet and Anna to take a look at county plans as well. For those of you who don't know, Juliet and Anna work for NPC Research, which is the research and evaluation group that has been Molly, Juliet working with us since the JCP came into existence, which is about 1999. So, and at the end of each biennium, Juliet's team review all the data that have been reported and collected for JCP risk assessments, and then the evaluation comes to life. So, needless to say, Juliet and Anna is central to the work to the JCP work. So I don't know what you see. I see counties, but so for those of you who are new to these things, and for those of you who have been working with the smart sheets, I hope I'm not, well, new people, it's an introduction. People who have been working with them, I hope I'm not like causing any traumatic memories by showing them to you. So they're extensive. So each county submitted a plan, and the plan was the guidelines for the planning process were based on the Oregon statutes that put certain requirements out for counties and what needs to go into the plan. In addition, we also have some policy recommendations around racial and ethnic disparities work, asking counties to analyze the data that exists, and we make reference to Oregon Youth Authority website where Juvenile Justice Information System publishes annual racial and ethnic disparity reports for each county in particular. So that's kind of what went into it. And then there are requirements that local public safety coordinating council needs to the plan. There are also required participation that is needed for local communities and so forth. So in all of this lengthy spreadsheet, we have the counties, we have the contact information, which is super important because I think there's still a lot of confusion, like who does what, who signs the agreement, who sends the reporting, who enters information and requests for reimbursement into EGMS, which is electronic grants management system. So all this, that's what makes the document so lengthy or so wide, I'd say, because it's not so long. It's still 36 entities in there, but each one has a lot of information. So as my job was to make sure that all answers were present in the report, that the local coordinating, well, LIPSIC approved the thing. I was looking for what type of youth the community is planning to serve, be it first-time offenders, low-risk offenders, non-offender, like, because there's a variety of type of kids who can fit the JCP criteria and so forth, and who will provide the service. In some counties, it's the juvenile department that will be providing the service. Others contract it out with other organizations. So that's kind of what goes into all this kind of long thing. Also super important, especially for us, is whether the juvenile crime prevention assessments will be conducted and who will be doing it and what assistance will they need from Juliet and Anna here. And another big important bit is where this information will be housed. Will the data go into data manager, which is a database operated by Oregon Department of Education on our behalf, or it will be going into Juvenile Justice Information System. So all of this housekeeping is one thing. And then Lawrence took specific interest in the answers for question 6, which was around cultural competence and how culturally specific services will be provided for racial and ethnic groups, as well as how the community will be working with LGBTQ plus youth. And Lawrence have completed his review, so it's all in there. And then, most importantly, the committee members were assigned, well, they were rather, I don't know, Malik should say assigned. They were asked to take a closer look at specific group of counties, and each committee member reviewed theirs. And in some cases, you will see reviewers' comments entered. In some cases, comments can be submitted verbally. So that's our review. then in the follow-up recommendations by the committee, that's what we're looking at. If there are some county plans that need some additional work, that's where we will put it there. The recommendation is whether to approve the plan, rather recommend the plan for approval by YDC on Thursday or not. So what's been happening in the past, if the recommendation could be to approve the plans as they are, or approve the plans with some additional work that needs to be done in some individual cases, if that's the case. Anyway, Molly, did I summarize it okay?
You did. I think that that's a good summary and process. I think I'm going to ask Joy to go back over to where we can see the counties. And I did a printout of them, and I just wanted to note that all of that Anya and Lawrence, everybody had found that all of the plans were in compliance with the guidelines and in compliance with the necessary elements, meaning exactly what Anya just talked about. And so now I would be interested in, and I'll take the lead, I think, just to model it maybe. So I had 5 counties, and I think if we can approve them kind of in groups, that would be really helpful. And so I had Clatsop, Grant, Lane, Tillamook, and Wheeler were the counties. And I guess my high level kind of takeaway from reading the different plans that I think our committee as a whole may want to discuss, not today, but in a larger piece, is that many of the counties are articulating and looking at, Anya, do you want to catch him before I keep going?
I'm so sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but just to let you know that Maricela and Tabidi have joined us.
Oh, perfect. Oh, thank you. I saw Marcella come on, and so it's great to have, I knew he would come in around this time, Tabidi here. So anyway, had the opportunity to take a look at them. One thing I noticed in all of the plans that I read are that counties are really looking towards kind of one evidence-based promising practice model for intervention, which is the Girls Circle and Boys Council curriculum. And so I think it'll be interesting to have a conversation around how best to do a statewide implementation of that, or a statewide access to that, or just acknowledge that we have a lot of continuity across the state with many of our communities looking at some of the same curriculum. And so I don't have any action items for that, but I would recommend to the committee that for the 5 that I looked at, that we recommend approval. Did a lot of great, all 5 of them talked about how they're using positive youth development, and how they're using the risk principle, and how they're identifying racial and ethnic disparities in their communities, and how they're learning more about it, and how they're working towards really looking at the learning more about the LGBTQ plus population, and looking towards and wanting some technical assistance in that. So again, the 5 that it was Clatsop, Grant, Lane, Tillamook, and Wheeler. So really large county, really small county, I would recommend approval. And so that would be my takeaway, and I'd have any questions if anybody had them as we get towards the end. But I'm going to ask Sam, since you have a 2 o'clock, would you have an opportunity to share with us what you learned from the plans you read?
Sure. On Friday, I read that the plans for Benton, Gilliam, Lake, Multnomah, and Wasco. And then I'm going to say something, and then it's not to demean or to diminish the effort or the plans of others, but it was very stark where some of the plans you could tell when a county had multiple authors or people working on the plan versus certain counties, it was just one person. And actually, one person actually said, I'm it. You know, I'm the only, you know, their entire juvenile department is her, you know. And I'm just saying, and I just feel, I felt for them. And then as Molly said, they were saying, yeah, for the LGBTQ, they're always looking for things, they want to be inclusive. They mentioned about like Annie Casey, there are, you know, things like that. Yeah, but then I feel all five should, the five that I read, were really great. And like Molly, I know she doesn't, well, she doesn't have a great staff, but she did, it was up there with Multnoma's, you know, application plan. Yeah, and I'm just gonna
That's
say,
very
you know,
kind.
yeah, you know, I'm just saying, you know, some of our counties, I just feel sorry for them, you know, I'm just saying, you know, for the juvenile directors that they're it, everything, just like we have some school superintendents that are the school bus driver, the cafeteria manager, you know, and all that kind of stuff, right? And also the elementary, high school and vice and the principal, you know, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I feel, yeah, I just hope other reviewers kept that in mind. And I did when I read the plans, the capacity of each county and the amount of staff available to them.
And so with that, Sam, is your recommendation to approve the plans you read?
Yes, Benton, Gilliam, Lake, Multnomah, and Roscoe. Yes.
Awesome. Adrian, thanks for popping the note in the chat. So any questions for Sam? And you did have a diverse, I have to say, you had the biggest county and the second littlest county. So you had a diverse group there, Sam.
Yeah.
All right, Adrian.
Yes, I had Clackamas, Douglas, Klamath, and Polk. So I'll first talk about Clackamas, Klamath, and Polk because I think all of those three were very, you know, robust applications. I could see what they're applying for, whether it's like in Klamath, it was a mentorship program 1-to-1 for middle school students, 4 through 6 actually. What they didn't put in their application, but I do have experience is All Hands Raised has had a model of 9th grade counts because they saw that there was not a transition from several students in middle school going to high school. So even though they didn't call it out in their application, I think what they're doing really helps that. So definitely wanted to say yes for that. Clackamas, working with at-risk youth. I think both Clackamas and Polk working with youth who are vulnerable for entering into the juvenile justice department and trying to prevent it, especially if it's a first-time offender, et cetera. So I think, you know, like Polk County, they have a sanction court. So I think both of those I would say yes to, and they spoke to the diversity. You know, there are some like Polk County, I'm like, you know, there's still some work to be done, but it's actually also nationwide when it comes to the disproportionality of any individuals. In their case, it's youth at risk, but you know, throughout the nation, it's just even adults at risk or adult population of color. So I would say for those three, I would say yes and propose they move forward. The one I would not is Douglas County because they didn't provide a lot of detailed information. It was very top level. This is, you know, it was for counseling. It was a treatment center that, at least from what I read, for possibly 4 to 6 families within the schools. I couldn't tell if it was 4 to 6 families per school or if it was a total. So for me, I just didn't have, I think, the detail that I would want to make a complete assessment. So, and I see there's a hand.
Lauren.
Hi, and yes, thank you. So Douglas County submitted their application after everyone else had. We're still, you know, trying to reach out to them and speak to them about some of the deficiencies maybe in their plan. So basically, we're working with them. We saw the same things you were, and we're going to reach out to them and speak to them a little bit further or about adding some things, or
Yes.
at least trying to explain a little bit more in detail what it is that they have to offer.
Wonderful. I was thinking, am I missing some pages? After reviewing some of them, I'm like, oh, really? So yeah, okay, great to know that you're working with that county. because it's needed. I think of COVID and the mental health issues that are going on. It's definitely a needed treatment. I do know that.
Hey. So I think that, so I'm just gonna hold a space, and when we go to do the final approval of it, I'm actually gonna hold that one out, and we'll make a special acknowledgement for that. And to be, I actually had a suspicion that maybe you were swamped because I hadn't seen any emails, so I can actually give an update. I read through those plans. So, so we can kind of hopefully get through that, if that's okay with you. Okay. Ralphie or Keith, are you able to touch base on Columbia, Harney, Lincoln, and Sherman?
I'm muted. No, I'm not. Well, I can share that just between, so I missed the May meeting and I've been traveling for work ever since. So due to a couple different issues, I didn't meet my deadline. If those plans haven't been reviewed, it's something I can definitely get done this week. But Kiwi, I don't know if you were able to look through those.
I'm not sure Kiwi can come off mute. I'm not sure. Okay. Marcella, how about yours?
Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I also did not meet my deadline. I'm actually going through them right now. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I apologize for that.
Okay. Anya, do you have a thought on how we can process so let me tell you, so TBD, I thought I would hear from you if you were able to get them done. So yours were the only ones I looked at because I just knew that you had some timeline conflicts. So again, I'm going to share that Crook, Hood River, Lynn, and Umatilla, again, very common theme across the state on mentoring, coming into working with youth, boys council, girls circle, one-on-one mentoring, all very similar across those, and lots of conversation in each of them around how they're approaching racial and ethnic disparities, either through inclusive action with youth and outreach, as well as really seeking and skill building staff. But Anya, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are kind of a little unclear.
I know. I have a proposal. Do you want to hear it?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so I actually think that we could do a couple things as a group. I know that we have our quarterly meeting on Thursday, and I know that we have all of the mandates in the planning process have been checked and confirmed by staff. Except for Douglas, and I know you're working with Douglas on that specific one. And there's a couple other that have blanks, such as who needs to sign or the contact person, the primary contact. I think we could move them all forward with a recommendation. Pending and getting them moving forward, and then in July at our July meeting, the finalizing or at least having a report out on the ones that didn't get a report out today. Does that seem like a reasonable option?
I think so, because we could have, if needed, follow up with counties that haven't been completely reviewed. And after the YDC approves plans and includes the counties that haven't been reviewed, and Douglas County that we already know needs additional technical assistance. But the reason I was also hesitant is to say, well, I was wondering, should we read some reviews that Christina McMahon submitted? I know that she's not going to be joining us until 2 o'clock, but she's done such thorough review of counties.
So I think she's gonna jump on, and I want to make sure that we honor that. But if everybody has it, I think it would be great to pull up one of, so for example, on Baker, she writes, it's an impressive on how the youth accountability officer has been deployed and leveraged in so many ways to meet the individual needs of youth and families and provide prevention services to help the whole community. I especially appreciated the anecdote about father and son who were having conflict, and how Ray, the youth accountability officer, helped work through their conflicts and discuss potential consequences for the son if problematic behavior. And then the family later came into the office to thank the YAO for his help and report that there had been other issues, had no other issues or delinquency referrals. This is what our work in juvenile department should all be about: resolving things at the lowest level possible and helping families be successful. Let's see, she also then has Deschutes. Let's see, let me see if I can get across the Deschutes. She is like my hero when it comes to reviewing these things. Just so
I know, that's why I felt like, we cannot just ignore her contribution, because I don't know if we will have time to return, come back to this agenda item when she is present.
So she writes, oh yeah, you can see this, an excellent and comprehensive plan that really shows the commitment to equitable service delivery across the continuum of juvenile justice, from true prevention to the deep end. The research and the planning to develop future gender-specific cognitive behavioral treatment services for youth who identify as female is impressive in its thoughtfulness and sensitivity, and recognition that components beyond a group setting may need to be incorporated. This is an area where few juvenile departments in the state are focusing, so Deschutes may be in a position to provide a model and train other communities in the area. The work to partner and support the development of community cadre teams to support creation of restorative justice cultures in school in Deschutes County is inspiring and a great example of what can happen when a community comes together.
Thank you, Molly. Well, see if you guys get a sense what our thorough and thoughtful review Christina provided, and she did similar things to the other 3 counties. Well, thank you, Molly. I just, before we conclude the county discussion, maybe Lawrence has some thoughts he would like to share with us, because he did the extensive review of the cultural responsivity area.
Yes, Lawrence. You're on mute.
Sorry about that.
I'm sorry, Lawrence, before you jump in, Joy, since we're not looking like really county by county, is that okay if you stop sharing the screen and just like, let's look at each other? No?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, that works.
So yes, I took care of the requirements of question 6, cultural appropriateness, and basically when you looked at the plans, there were 3 areas that we really wanted to target and focus on to try to capture exactly what it is that the plans for each county was participating in as far as their work in that area. So we spoke about, describing inclusive and appropriate cultural strategies, and they could place some sort of appendix C, you know, a description of that. And we asked them to reference, at the very least, racial and ethnic disparities identified in the data analysis, their RRI or relative rate index, as well as describe, you know, how the program services was affirming and developmentally supportive of LGBTQ+. And overwhelmingly, the counties provided great insight and great information. The plans were articulate in these areas. And like Sam said, I was very impressed with the amount of resources that they didn't have, but the quality of service that they did provide with what they had to work with. So it showed that, you know, small counties with small budgets and, you know, minimal resources were still investing heavily in the cultural appropriateness of those that they serve. So that was very impressive. I was very pleased to see that. Again, overwhelmingly, out of the 36 counties, maybe one needed a little more advice and technical assistance in the LGBTQ area. I'm still working with that one particular county, as well as another county just wasn't as robust as they probably could in explaining exactly what they are doing. So again, question 6, Anya and I tried to get out early ahead of that this year, this biennium, to just kind of explain what we were looking for. And again, the 3 areas that could be, you know, really highlighted and zoomed in for the counties to really focus on and target what we were trying to capture. And I think that was done well by them. Hopefully we were clear in our explanation as to what we were looking for. And I think by just having those communications early on, it was helpful.
Can I say, Lawrence, that I could tell the difference from last year to this year, the quality of applications. So you guys did a wonderful job. I could tell the difference.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I just want to really thank Lawrence and Anya for making the road trips to meet and become part of the juvenile justice system, to be able to have time with us in each of the meetings, and just really the commitment to driving was amazing.
Thank you, Melly.
Yeah, and flying, I guess we. Okay, Anya, any other thoughts?
No, just real deep appreciation for all your hard work, all of you, and your kind words, Adrian and Molly. And if we are clear what our plan is, which is, let me repeat if I remember it correctly. So the committee will recommend the approval of all 36 county plans by the YDC at the YDC meeting on Thursday. Meanwhile, those plans that haven't been reviewed, the review will conclude by the committee members. We will follow up with the county that we already know that needs some follow-up with, which is Douglas. And once we got the reviewers' work back to us, we will also know what additional counties may need assistance. That's correct? And the timeline for that is when?
So a couple of things. One is, I think we're going to recommend to the YDC on Thursday to move forward with contracting with all of the counties. And that the ones that we weren't able to review today, we're going to ask everyone to be ready to review those in July with us and just kind of give us an input, kind of a presentation like we did today for the rest of the counties, so that we as a committee have had that kind of dialogue around the plans. And with the only caveat is that one county, we're going to recommend that there be more negotiations and more understanding of what the plan is, and that's Douglas County, before we enter into a contract with Douglas County. But so that we can keep the process moving, but that we also keep the oversight and the input from our committee moving along as well. And so the request will be for the last, so Rafi, Tabiti, Marcella, and Andy will ask at the July meeting to do an report out similar to what we did. Does that seem reasonable? Okay, thumbs up, and I will entertain a motion for that.
So moved.
Thank you, Adrienne. Is there a second?
I second.
Thanks, Marcella. And I'm just going to ask if there's any opposition to that. Okay, Anya, is that clear for you?
It's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes, and I really appreciate the note, Sam, about ODE procurement. That is exactly why I think even if we start the contracting options, our committee has time to weigh in. So the second part will be, can we now talk about our tribal plans?
Thank you. Okay, Juliet and Anna, it's all yours now.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. So we have, as you might remember, 9 federally recognized tribes or tribal confederations in Oregon. This year, or this biennium, this cycle, all of them submitted their plans on time. Hooray. So that was the type of accomplishment. As you might remember, the tribes don't have as extensive of specifications with what their tribal plans have to include as the counties. So they're a slightly different format, but they do have information about various aspects of their planning process, including the collaborations, a background about their communities or the kinds of issues that they're trying to address, specifics about what programming they're proposing to fund with their JCP dollars, and their use of evidence-based practice and tribal best practices, as well as some information about who the focus of their service is and who's going to be doing the assessment process, the JCP tool, and the entry. So all of our tribes are part of our data manager, the ODE's data managers data system. So they're not in JGIS like some of our juvenile departments, but they have the option to complete their own data entry of the JCP assessment or have NPCs help with that. And so this is the first cycle where we have more tribes actually doing their own and getting access to the database and utilizing that service and that resource themselves. I wanted to mention that we also have, out of our 9 communities, we have 2 brand new tribal prevention coordinators this cycle, and 1 community that's in transition, because we have a very long-term JCP coordinator who's retired and is helping to transition to a new person. So we have a little bit of change and transition happening that actually did impact where the programming was housed. So in our tribes, there are lots of different places where JCP service can be located, from prevention to courts to family services. So that will be a little bit of a change, but even though there was change, we saw really comprehensive and detailed planning and very clearly a commitment to understanding what's happening in the community and knowing what are the kinds of needs that they have and what kinds of resources can JCP help them provide with their plans. So they did, talk a lot about community challenges like the counties do, the poverty, the substance use, different kinds of issues that are in the communities that they're dealing with, or that the youth in their communities are dealing with, as well as the impact, kind of residual ongoing impacts of the pandemic challenges. They also described very thoughtful connections with their collaborating partners to their prevention efforts and why these services, specifically their culturally specific services, are so important. As I mentioned, kind of the programs are housed within specific departments, but they, in their collaboration sections, talked about all of the different other tribal departments that they work with, which is really impressive just as background, because so often some of the work in our tribal communities within the tribal departments can be siloed a bit, and having that collaboration and coordination, communication and work between some of the programs really brings together some of these resources that can be so limited in some of our more rural areas. So they work with culture and heritage, with community services and their health center and their behavioral health people, their tribal court or police departments, education, social services. So really seeing a lot of nice collaborations. They also talked about work with the other tribes. Some of them, all of them kind of come together in this quarterly tribal meeting, but they also do some of their activities together if there are tribes that have shared cultural backgrounds and are kind of geographically near each other. And then they have an annual summer cultural camp that they bring youth together, prevention camp. So they work with other Native organizations, with county and state and federal agencies. So we heard them or read about them talking about collaborating with community colleges, with library locally, with their local prevention coalitions for substance use, with parents and guardians. So really a lot of thoughtful kind of coordination. They all talked about providing multiple services. And I think that's something I was hearing with some of the counties too, like how many needs there are and how they're able to leverage and bring together lots of different types of services and individualize for what the youth needs. So the JCP services that they're proposing include things like school support around tutoring and coordination and mentoring, transportation to different events, summer programs, lots of camps and conferences, behavioral health therapy and other kinds of supports, lots of culturally specific outings, classes, activities, helping families connect to needed resources, and some gender specific services. In terms of their focus, most of the tribes have very specific cultural activities that they include as part of their JCP programming, and some connection to evidence-based Native specific services. So Native Stand, we did see Girls Circle and Boys Council there too, which is interesting, Molly, that you mentioned that. American Indian life skills, and then lots of traditional types of activities. So learning about making regalia and traditional arts and crafts, basket weaving, beading, building, spears, tule duck making, some emphasis this cycle on traditional or first foods. So gathering, preparing traditional foods. We have the canoe family in some of our communities. And so the healing of the canoe curriculum, as well as learning about the traditions and ceremony around canoe, ceremonies in general, and some of the dances, and teaching traditional values and life skills and self-care through connections with tribal mentors and elders, visiting culturally meaningful and significant locations. And some of them I already mentioned, kind of culture camps and cultural classes. And in addition to the tribal practices, we did see some focus on other kinds of evidence-based practices like suicide prevention around QPR, question, persuade, and refer trainings, equine therapy. I mentioned behavioral health therapy, mentoring and case management services, support services. So a lot of different kinds of activities in our 9 tribal communities. And then as we see with the counties, some have very intensive services for higher risk youth who are involved in juvenile justice, to broader community-based services and kind of earlier prevention programming and supports. So kind of a range there too. Anya and Anna and I will be attending the quarterly tribal prevention meeting tomorrow in Canyonville, Cow Creek, and we have some follow-up that we will do with some of the details. But again, the plans this year were very comprehensive, and I think warrant being moved forward as well. I don't think there was anything in terms of the detail, and this is something for Anya to confirm, but whether or not, I don't think any of the details that we wanted to follow up on were in any way prohibitive of them being approved and moving forward. Just some additional information we thought might be useful to provide.
Okay, I know how much money that is in the grants. They're doing a lot with a very little bit of money.
They really do. They really do. A lot of commitment.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are there
Any-
questions for us? Oh, sorry. Molly.
Yeah, that's okay. No, any questions for Juliet? Great, thank you.
Sure.
Anna and Juliet for doing that and having the expertise and supporting our tribes, because I know one of the pieces that the counties often have is we have some infrastructure to help support. And I know many of the tribes do not have the infrastructure that we have. And so I've appreciated both YDO as well as NPC's commitment to help, like getting the assessments put into data manager.
Well, and I just wanted to add to Molly's comments, Juliet and Anna, thank you so much for doing the review of the plans and the follow-up that I know that you will be doing, and for all the work that you've done with the tribes and continue to do so. And looking forward to seeing you tomorrow in Canyonville. And Lawrence will be there as well.
Wonderful. That would be great.
Okay, so similar, do I have a motion to move forward or take the recommendation from Juliet and Anna to move forward the contracting for the tribal JCP for the 23-25 biennium?
So moved.
Thank you, Adrian. Is there a second? Thank you, Tabiti. So I have a motion to move forward and a second. Are there any objections? Great. A lot of work. I know this is one of our biggest lifts of the biennium, and I know we had lots of conversations as we developed the plan guidelines several months ago. So a huge thank you. And if we can have the agenda back up, that frees us up and frees some space up for us to have some additional conversations and moving forward with kind of our next request, which, the JCP budget update. Anya, do you have anything other than it's just we're at a continuing service level at this moment in time?
So, yes, that's pretty much it. So I was, Cord Bucher, who's our deputy director, and I had a conversation earlier, actually last week, about what the allocation amounts might be for the next biennium. And the thing is, as Molly said, we really don't know at this point, because as most of you know, the legislature is not really working right now, not to the full extent that we can hope for any budget to be approved anytime soon, certainly not by the YDC meeting on Thursday. But so the only number that we have is the governor's budget, which is still subject to change. But in the governor's budget, so I'll just to share the numbers with you. The allocation for JCP grant and aid, which is what goes out to the last penny to counties and tribes. Actually, anecdotally, last year we had to reduce one county's allocation by $1, which was Lane County, so they could afford it. But we were kind of like $1, a few cents short. So Star was very gracious to allow us to take $1 off hers. Anyway, but joking aside, in the governor's budget, what goes into that amount for JCP is $6,635,798, which is $267,469 more than the current biennial one. So the question would be, once the budget is approved, whether it will be at the same level as the governor was proposing or higher, hopefully not lower. That might be a change in the allocations. And then it will be a question for the YDC to decide what would be the amount of the minimum grant. But at this point, we really are speculating on the numbers, but I just wanted you as committee members to be aware that it's something that might come to, that will need a discussion and a conversation and a decision and recommendation to be made. But at this point, what Court and I are recommending is to extend the existing agreements that we have with counties and tribes, well, provided the YDC approves the plans as we're submitting them for their consideration, to extend the agreements for time through the next biennium and for the same amounts of money that have been allocated currently for this biennium. And then once we know what new allocations will be, then we can adjust those agreements accordingly. But I think Sam put in there like a little note, because he is very familiar with procurement process at ODE, that could be very lengthy. So that's kind of, but I wanted you to have this information, and unless you have recommendations for us how to proceed, this is where we're at.
So my recommendation, and by all means, I'll ask if anybody else has a different one to speak up, but just to status quo at this moment in time until maybe our July meeting, but it might be our August meeting before we really know, because the co-chairs have come close. I think they're getting close to the end of their budget getting put together. I mean, co-chairs have put out a budget, but Ways and Means, but we really won't know. And then we're gonna need to ask staff to do a couple of scenarios for us. So it'll probably be our August meeting where we finalize the budgets. And counties understand that.
Thank you, Molly.
Yeah. Any questions around budget? Any words of wisdom, or you know, I don't know.
Molly, I see that Brian just joined us.
I just saw that too.
To say hello, is share his wisdom about our budget.
Yeah.
Oh my, I don't know if I have any wisdom. We're waiting.
Yeah.
Waiting on the legislature. Continuing resolution should allow us, maybe this has already been said, enough funding to kind of proceed with, you know, making awards. So in our RFA process, and I think JCP as well, we'd probably want to keep those levels at the same level as they were in the current biennium rather than any adjustment, just to play it safe. But those are my 2 cents.
Yes, and we talked a little bit about that. And in the governor's budget, there's no reductions. And so I think that's the biggest thing to watch out for.
Yeah.
And so I think we can just stay status quo.
Yep.
And again, all of the JCP partners with the state right now are very familiar with the state budgeting process. So I don't think there'll be any surprises.
Cool.
Okay. Has Sonia been able to join us?
I just texted her and she responded that hold on.
Okay.
No, she hasn't responded yet. So,
okay.
Lawrence, if you're in the same building as Sonia, because I know they're both participating in the OJDDA curriculum development. So, Lawrence, if you could just go and poke her and tell her she's about to be on, maybe we could talk about the trip to Washington, D.C. while we're waiting for Sonia to join us.
So I'm no longer in the same building, but I will try to read your email.
Yeah, would you?
Sure. So I don't think Paul is on either. Anya, do you want to take away the OJJDP convening, Hill Day and CJJ conference, and I'll pick up after you've shared?
Sure, I will start, but I will also ask Lawrence and Lindsay to help me, probably Lindsay first, because Lawrence is trying to get hold of Sonia. So Lindsay and Lawrence participated in the OJDP convening, and I ended up going to the Hill with Molly and Paul, and we'll get to that report in a moment. So Lindsay, are you there? Do you want to say a few words about the OJDP convening? Because quite a bit of it was dedicated to compliance monitoring.
Yeah, I'm here. It's just for some reason when I tried to get in, it says I need an update for Zoom, and I can't get that without help desk. So I can't use my camera for some reason either. It's blocked, but I made it in. And yeah, while we were at the Department of Justice, we got to meet more people. A lot of states showed up, both for compliance and the RED roles. They talked about what they do in certain situations and how their state can differ from one another. And so mostly we just learned what other states do and their challenges, how many counties they have, things like that.
Okay.
Thank you, Lindsay. Lawrence, are you able to say a few words? Or shall we get back to you later? Joy, we're not like really looking at the agenda right now. Do you think maybe we could
We can take it down. Yeah, thanks.
take it down and so we can see each other? Thank you.
So yes, at the meeting, and I'm sorry, at the meeting in DC, there was a lot of one-on-one sessions, as well as group sessions for racial and ethnic disparity coordinators. And there was a lot of information concerning not necessarily the awareness of it, but the need for it to be made aware in all the work that we do. So there was a heavy emphasis on the fact that racial and ethnic disparities still exist in the juvenile justice system, something that that has been trying to be combated for years. So they're putting more emphasis on it to make more traction in that area. So there were a lot of workshops concerning that. There were a lot of, again, one-on-ones, opportunities to speak with people who had been in the industry for several years, through their experience, through their training, through their knowledge, the differences in different states and how they address these things, and just the overall collectiveness of everyone doing this work, and trying to make that aware in all aspects of this work. With the level of knowledge that's in this work, juvenile justice overall, there should be a better collaborative effort in really making some strides and moving forward in reducing some of these disparities that continue to exist. So there was great information there. There was great opportunities to network with people who could be mentors because they've been doing it so long. And just, again, the different experiences throughout the different states was very helpful.
Great. I know, I think, Lawrence, we had some great opportunities to just visit and lots of information. Lawrence was getting immersed pretty quickly. Ralphie, before Anya, you got to join us back there. What did you think?
Yeah, it was a nice conference. My first time attending, I went with my team through Oregon Youth Authority, the Youth Reformation Systems team. We do a lot of implementation and project management work, and also support our agency through some data tools. I would say the biggest thing for my team through this conference was probably the discussions around youth engagement. It was really specific to youth engagement through state advisory groups, but I think it just provided us some little nuggets and inspiration for, we try to engage youth in a lot of our projects throughout OYA, but I think that there are just some ways that we could better support them through that entire process and make it much more engaging and meaningful versus feeling like, okay, we checked a box, we have youth voice. So that was really great for us. Yeah, I feel like I'm still coming down from that trip. Haven't had much time to process, but it was good.
Okay. Now, Anya, you want to talk about Hill Day?
Oh, sure. Well, it was long and it was very productive. And Joy, thank you so much for making all these arrangements. So Joy deserves a round of applause. She managed to schedule 7 meetings out of 8 because we have 8 people representing Oregon in Congress, and we met with 7. So the only office that was not available was Senator Wyden's office, but we all know in many years that we worked with the senator and his staff that they've been in full support of both the juvenile justice issues and the work. So it was very interesting because it was a different group of folks that we met with this time, since the border lines have moved within the districts in the state. We met some new people, and we met new people representing different districts, and we met people who've been there before, but the districts have changed. So that was an interesting dynamic. So it was really helpful. In some offices, they would have a map of the district in the waiting room, so we could kind of figure out where they are and what type of programs that we support might be of interest to them, for them to hear about, including tribal programs as well. So anyway, I thought it was very productive. So far, we got all 7 yeses to support the reauthorization of the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act and the funding that comes with it, as well as just generally the work of the Youth Development Oregon. And Molly, you had a very interesting, Molly was super helpful. At the last meeting, I didn't even, it's not that I didn't know what to say, I couldn't speak. I was so tired. And Molly completely took it over and she saved the day. But yeah, but one yes was super, super precious. So you want to talk about that one yes?
So the one yes was, so a couple things. Number one is we were able to, in each of the conversations, we brought up the JCP plans and talked about what the JCP plans are doing in each of the 36 counties. And so we had real information for each of the congressman and senator. Well, Senator Merkley's office really took the lead. We answered more questions for him, for his office. He was actually very knowledgeable of what's going on. But we were able to highlight story of Yamhill County. We were able to talk about specifically what's going on in Benton County. We were able to talk about, so lots of kudos to this group of having the dialogue around what we're doing with our juvenile crime prevention planning work. And while that's not the federal money, of course, it really says what we're doing here locally in the state to support youth and families. And then that, of course, leads up to a larger conversation around education, lots of emphasis and energy around homelessness, lots of emphasis and energy around education. The one yes that was Anya was talking about is we were talking with Congressman Bentz, and the conversation, he had very pointed questions. He was very direct with us. And he came to a point where he said, typically the ask, he said, typically I start these conversations with a no and you have to convince me. And he said, I'm starting with a yes for you all. And we really didn't ask him for anything at that moment in time. It was really just off the kind of cuff that he offered that information to us. And that was the surprising one of, because Anya and Paul, as state employees, of course, cannot lobby, and we were not doing that. We were just sharing information. And so his kind of spontaneous just support was 2 things. One, it was surprising. And 2, it was just, wow, that's kind of cool. So anyway, it was a long day. Joy, I cannot tell you how amazing you are. on setting up those hour blocks, because it gave us just enough time to walk from one building to the next building, back to the other building, to the other building, to the other building. So 15,000 steps later, we were done with walking the hill.
That is so true.
The other part, though, at the CJJ conference is, again, I think as we go into 2024, we have dollars set aside to support our SAG. And anybody who would like to take up the offer for us to go back to CJJ as a member of the council, I would just encourage people to take a look at their calendars now, even to be available to do that for next year, because it really is a good time to network and hear best practices. So not only did we go and OYA went, but a couple of our local programs went as well. So oftentimes we have a couple of CBOs, community-based organizations who've been going for a long time. And then it's annually in May. TBD, it's typically whatever the last week of May is. The last full week of May is when it is. We had one of our counties present. And so Alice Perry from Clackamas County was on a panel with strategies for youth, and some work that they are doing in Clackamas County was being held up as a best practice with strategies for youth and the work that they've been working with law enforcement and community members around policing the teen brain. And so it was fun to get to see one of our state local partners actually participate and be a leader, a national representation. So that was fun. And she did a great job.
Well, thank you. I will tell her you said that, Molly.
Yeah, it was good. So any questions about CJJ and our role? I represented you all at the annual meeting. I only voted on incoming officers, and there was only one contested race. So hopefully I brought pride to the family on my vote for the person who was then elected to the position.
Totally brought the pride to the family.
It's a big table when there's 50 people around that table, and trying to run a board meeting with 50 people is a challenge. So, okay, is Sonia been able to hop on? I don't see her.
So I was just able to get in touch with Vicki Johnson.
Okay.
And she's alerting her now, and I believe Sonia's stepping out of her meeting, and we'll be calling Anya soon.
Okay, perfect.
Sonia just texted me that she will get on in a moment.
Okay, so can I just kick us off a little bit with the probation reform work?
Of course.
Just take Sonia's on. I want to make sure we absolutely use her time to the best of it. So as she's coming on.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
There you are. Go for it.
Okay. I'm sorry. I am on my phone. We're here at Marion County Juvenile doing the EPICS curriculum review. So I just stepped out when I got Anya's text. So yeah, let me know where you want to start.
So let me set the stage just a tiny bit, Sonia, and then you can go from there. So Oregon Juvenile Department Directors Association is the state association with all of the juvenile departments from all 36 counties. And OJDDA was formed back in the 1980s, really to support training for the county juvenile department staff, the probation officers and juvenile court counselors. And they have done that for the last 40 years. In doing so, about a year ago now, it was really brought to our attention through the OJDDA that we needed to do some updates and some work on curriculum. because it's a volunteer organization, meaning that we don't have paid staff to do training. We don't have paid staff to do curriculum development. It is put on the tables of, or it's put on the plates of current sitting juvenile department employees to do. And when it was brought to our attention that maybe we were a little bit out of date on some information, the juvenile directors really gave Sonia, who's the chair of that training committee, who's very busy and who takes us on herself to add to her plate, to seek some help and to ask for some support. So Sonia, does that set the table okay?
Yes, I hope so. It's a lot of history to cover in 3 minutes, so very nicely done, Molly. Yeah, so just along this journey, and I just also want to give a shout out to Lawrence, who has also been helping joining this group that has been doing this curriculum review with us, which has been amazing to have Lawrence's insight and expertise in this setting. But we realized quickly after going through our fundamental skills training, which is kind of like our academy for new juvenile justice workers in Oregon, and then our custody and residential training for new staff working in our facilities or residential programs. Those are both about week-long trainings. And after we got through the review of that curriculum, and we did a review screening for bias and inclusion, we realized that it was more than just fixing a few slides or a few, languages or images here. It was really in need of an overhaul of the curriculum to be brought up to date with evidence-based practices in juvenile justice, with even our own detention. We have our state Oregon Juvenile Detention Standards guideline that we just updated in 2020, I think. Just alignment with that, alignment with, the values and core beliefs that OJDDA holds, along with our partners, OIA and YDO, that it was an overhaul that was needed. And as Molly just framed, we just, the training committee doesn't have the capacity to do that. So we've been working on talking about what does that look like? And we've done this before in Oregon, where we've brought in some consultants from the outside to help build statewide training. We've done that with our JCP module training. And of course, we also use EPICS, which was, a package training model from UC, and we did some train the trainers around that. So we have a couple models where we've seen that be successful. This is a little bit bigger lift than that. And so we reached out to a couple consultants, which I think you all hopefully got the draft proposal and budget. And so Anya encouraged us to come and seek some technical assistance with the resource lift for this endeavor. And, Joe and I met with the consultants last week to just walk through the proposal and the budget. And it definitely is a little bit more time and resources than we were initially thinking. But when we walked through all the components that need to be present in this, which one of them will include a training of the trainers module that is sustainable, that will sustain over time. So even if you get new trainers in, they'll go through the same process and get trained to a fidelity standard. We think it's just time for us to do that in Oregon. And so I'll just stop there and see what folks' questions or thoughts.
So Joe is Joe Ferguson, the juvenile director for Jackson County.
Yes, he also sits on the training committee. Yep.
Yeah. So questions?
So I just want to make a comment. Sonia, the committee members have not received the documents that you sent to me because they came a little late on Friday. So Joy was showing them on the screen, but we can, if anybody wants to take a closer look at it. But could you just name the amount of money you're asking for?
Yes, and I don't have it in front of me, but I think it was roughly about 100 grand over a 2-year period.
So
If
you're
you have the
asking,
exact number, you can share that.
you're asking the committee for 100 grand over 2-year period.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, this is the lift that we are gonna, oh yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's really hard to see on my phone, but yeah, I mean, this is where the consultants came in to do all the work that's in the plan. Now, we're not necessarily asking YDO to cover all that unless you want to, and you can, then that would be great.
No.
But we're just really asking for whatever support or way that you can show up with that resource would be great. And then we will see what OJDDA has. You know, we've talked, OYA has been part of this as well. So we have some other partners and sources we will look to, but we had this time blocked off with a quick turnaround for this committee meeting. So that's just, it's really just where we're at. We're not necessarily making that exact ask for the whole amount from YDO. Unless,
Okay,
like I
so-
said, you want to.
Right, because I was looking at the budget and I wasn't quite clear what the amount of support you were hoping for or asking for.
So I let me see if I can frame this. So the question would be from the committee is if you're interested in this, I think, and interested in supporting it, I think then we would be giving direction to Anya to work with OJDDA for us to come up with kind of a final proposal so that Anya kind of has an idea of if there's any technical assistance. Two things. One, if there's any technical assistance that we can ask for. And second, is there any technical assistance that our current, some of our previous dollars might be appropriate to allocate towards this? I know that OJDDA is going to be asked for some of the dollars, and I think that that OJDDA knows that they're going to need to put some on the table as well. And so I think we can come up with a collaborative blended braided funding model. But before we went too far, Anya and I felt like we needed to have support from the committee to ensure that this is something that really the committee wanted to focus and kind of support. So that was kind of where we wanted to make sure we started. Any thoughts? Christina, thank you for just raising your hand.
I'm trying to not yell out so much and interrupt people. So it's only taken me 3 years to get a little Zoom manners, but anyway, I think this is really super important to the work that's going on throughout the state because Sonia did a great job kind of teeing it up, summarizing, but this training that OJDDA does, Molly, you talked about how it started, why the association started. This has a really profound impact on the work, people starting out in their careers, but also people that are have been in the business a while. This is where almost every juvenile department invests its training dollars with sending our staff to these OJDDA trainings. So I think it's really courageous that Sonia and the committee is willing to take a look at this and say, hey, we really need to bring this up to date. And it seems like a lot of money when you hear it, but when I was reading through the proposal and I know one of the two, I know both of the consultants and I know one of them very well and have benefited from his expertise in 3 departments that I've worked in now over the years. So I think it, especially with what you just said, Molly, about really trying to pool different resources together, I think this is something that would really be valuable to the young people in our state because the ripple effect is really hard to estimate how much of a ripple effect there will be with this. So anyway, I've got some skin in the game, obviously, as a juvenile department director. So, but I'm very supportive of this.
Great. Others? And now I'm actually going to open it. Oh, I'm gonna actually open it up to non-committee members. I know we have a few other people on the call. And I would be open to thoughts from other people who are not necessarily on the JJ committee if they would like to weigh in and ask questions. So, Lawrence.
Hi, so as someone who's sort of intimately involved with this process, I can give firsthand knowledge as to the need for this endeavor. Like Sonia said, it's a huge lift. And looking at some of the material, it can be upgraded to represent the standards that we all practice here in Oregon. I would highly recommend that a nod of yes be given towards this project, because not only one, it's needed, and two, looking at the material, it definitely requires a lot of investment. So anything that can be afforded to this project will be well worth it for the staff that's coming in, for the staff that's already here, and to maintain the quality of service that we provide here in Oregon.
Thank you, Lawrence. Anyone else? So I was just starting to talk about probation reform and our role as a SAG in that. And my thought is, and I'll talk about detention guidelines as well. This committee has really focused on best practices and really around racial and ethnic disparities, and making sure that we have data and that we're using all of those tools to ensure that our system is a just and equitable system. And I feel like in order to do that, investing in training for frontline and juvenile justice employees is really kind of a key part in ensuring that we build a system that we as a SAG support and embrace, and kind of has similar kind of goals in it. And so it feels like it fits really nicely with what's going to be coming with the probation reform. A system based on the adolescent brain, a system based around youth and family involvement, a system based on tools that are objective and that do not continue the disproportionate contact of people who have been oppressed and marginalized deeper in our system. And so it feels like good timing for all of those things. So I do think it would be along the lines of what we have really modeled in this committee to take forward. So I would hope, I don't know what the number can look like, Anya, because I don't know what is available to us, but I know that you know what that number is eventually, and that we can braid some things together.
So yeah, appreciate the flexibility of time that you're giving us. As far as the support for this training, yes, by all means, we would like to support it. As far as how much is available, that will require a little bit of looking into our remaining budgets, because we would be using federal funds for that. How much is available there and how much we can possibly procure. Because another thing here is how would we procure it? So in the past, well, shouldn't say in the past. So we've been using this reimbursement process with the OJDDA to support the technical assistance for the conference, or the technical assistance that we provided to Deschutes County a couple of months ago to support culturally specific programming in Deschutes detention facility. And I'm only speaking like from pragmatic point of view, how do we do that? Because if we were to enter into some kind of contractual agreement with either OJDDA for the technical assistance training, it will be a different process. So if it's okay with the committee, could we do some homework on this request for 2 reasons? One, how much money is available and can be dedicated to that effort? And 2, once we know how much money is available and can be dedicated to this effort, what would be the procurement process we can go through to support this work? Does it make sense?
Yes, and I think we could probably do reimbursement with OJDDA again. I think that OJDDA could do that, Anya.
It depends on how much money.
I know.
So if it's $5,000, we could do reimbursement through.
Okay.
If it's more than that, it will be a challenge. Well, anyway, so why don't we?
Let us talk about that offline and figure out how to do that.
Can we talk about details and have an answer in a month's time period? But the overall, what I'm hearing is that we'll support the effort. It's just the amount and the process to be determined.
So I'm going to ask, does anybody have just any ideas or questions? Ralphie, do you have any?
I don't know about ideas, questions. I think for me, it's just like because I'm not as familiar with this part, I'm just a little fuzzy on exactly what, like exactly how this training works, how it supports the counties. I think seeing a proposal of what exactly we'd be funding and at how much, like that would be really helpful. But I feel generally supportive of Anya working with Sonia to kind of like come up with that.
Okay. So Tapiti, you asked a great question in the chat. So we used to offer it twice a year. Is that correct, Sonia? And the last time was about this time last year, a little bit like in August of last year. But then we have put it on pause since then. And then what we did is put kind of everything on pause, because to be very honest, we needed to take a look at it through a lens of equity and inclusion. And as we started down that process, it was, oh my gracious, a lot of this is out of date or has just been updated kind of like a jigsaw puzzle with pieces that don't really fit nice and neat. And they haven't, while standing alone, they may be okay, but as they were put together, it didn't come into a whole piece. So the last time a full review of all of the training was done was probably shortly after 1995 was the last full remodel. Fundamentals has been updated since then, right, Sonia?
Yeah, but not to any standard, which is interesting. One of the consultants has some longstanding training history in Oregon, and they were talking about they remember the training having trainer notes and trainer guidance, and so we went back and looked to see when the last time we could find those, which is a while ago. It was before my time as a trainer, so that was over like 14 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
There's been a little drift.
Yeah, I thought it was just late 1990s, early 2000s is when the real last time they've been updated. Any other questions? I think you do most of the chat, so that's okay.
So how regularly, once we do this, will the what's the plan for subsequent trainings? Will this one last 25 years, or was it 95 when the last? No, but I mean, seriously, I guess, and maybe this is too far out. I guess, do we have I guess the first part of the plan is getting it done, but then within the context of that, is there sort of a sustainability plan so there's not this big, enormous lift that happens again? I mean, yeah, as you pointed out, it's probably not as the benefits outweigh what the cost may look like. But anyway, you get my point, the question I'm asking.
Yes, and that's definitely built into the proposal. I think when you take a look at that, you'll see the elements there. They've kind of broken it out in phases, and one of those phases is creating a review process also a training onboarding that's consistent. So if we bring on new trainers 5 years down the road, they get the exact same training and guidance. And then we also have then a baseline. If we, can build a process that maintains that, we have a baseline by which to do a review. So that's definitely one of the elements of building into this is a sustainability process, which, like I said, we have a couple examples that we've had in Oregon. EPICS is one of them, which is effective practices in community supervision, which we've been training that in Oregon for 14 years now. And that model has worked. We've brought on new trainers and they have been trained the same way the original trainers are, and the material, the improvements and updates to it has come from the evidence-based practices and the institutions that curated it in the first place. So we won't look exactly like that model, but we have some models out there and nationally. So one of the other consultants has done this work all over the country and has some experience in building the sustainability model, but that is definitely one of the bigger pieces of it.
Hey. Adrian, I know you're driving, so I don't know if you remain silent, that's totally okay. But if you want to come off mute and ask any questions or thoughts, that would be fine too.
I'm good to listen in. It's been good. Thanks.
Thanks, Adrian. Marcella, anything from you? Any thoughts or questions that this has sparked?
I have nothing to add at this time, but thank you, Molly.
No, that's great. And Keith dropped off. Yes, okay.
Christina has her hand up.
And then I was going to finish and let Christina take us home on this topic.
I'm just showing off how I can use my real hand and my electronic hand now. It's taken 3 years. Anyway, I just wanted to say, I think that we need to have, I think this proposal looks good, and I do see the section, Sonia, you were talking about where it talks about sustainment, but I think we as an associate at OJDDA need to have a conversation about being very intentional about checking in on that curriculum. So to give a real life example, in the county, and I think most of you probably have these where you work, we have to do a COOP plan, continuity of operations plan. It's so exciting working on a COOP plan for everyone that's done that. Anyway, but it's a necessary evil because they become so outdated. So we're in the process of updating our COOP plan, and we started talking about, wow, we can't just do this. Oh, wow. Somebody said, oh, it's wildfire season. We need to get our COOP plan updated, right? Like, oh, no, we have to have some intentionality around keeping this thing up to date. So, we've decided 3 times a year, we're going to kind of run through it together to see what needs to be adjusted. So that's kind of my analogy. But I think with OJDDA, the strings attached, I think that YDC should give OJDDA is what is our plan to keep this from, we're joking around about 1995, but that is like 28 years ago. So we don't want to get into this situation again. I'm not criticizing it. Everybody has these, I can think of like 10 examples in my own department. But we want to make sure that this training is kept fresh and it's incrementally updated as needed so that we are best serving the folks, the participants, and therefore they can go out and do their best work. So I wanted to just say that out loud because I think that's really important. And I know this wasn't supposed to be a thesis. It's a 2-page summary proposal, but I just knew you were recording this and I thought I would just make sure I made a record that I said this. So anyway, thanks.
No, I think that's great. And I really appreciate you bringing it back to having some expectations or outcomes from our committee for the dollars that we spend, especially around the detention guidelines, because those are about the closest thing to standards we have in the state of Oregon around juvenile justice, and we're responsible by statute to do those. And so, okay, so the COOP plan, for those, I'm from Eastern Oregon. And so when I bring up the COOP plan, everyone wants to know how many chickens we're getting this year, just so you know, because it's about as exciting as going, it's not very exciting. But so I think that that's something that we should probably ask the group is to make sure that so dual hats right here, right? I'm sitting as an OJDDA member and current president. So I'm taking that hat off completely and saying, hey, actually, we need to be able to make sure that Oregon is using their dollars to be really around national best practices. And we know that our field is going to be changing with the probation reform. And so as things change, having that ongoing dialogue with OJDDA's training on what those things look like. So, and to be fair and honest, it really is just lands on directors and leads plates to just do this in your spare time. And that becomes that there is no spare time. So I appreciate the fact of going out and finding somebody to help us to work on it. Anya, do you have what you need to move forward?
Yes and no.
Okay, I thought so.
A couple of things. I'm not 100% clear whether the committee is supporting the request, and it seems that additional information is needed. So for now, what we will do, Joy will send the proposals to you, to the committee members to review, because it's challenging to follow it on the screen. And then meanwhile, so I would suggest we revisit the proposal at the next Juvenile Justice Committee meeting, and we will have more information and hopefully more understanding of what will be accomplished by the training and what possible outcomes we can expect and support. Meanwhile, on our part, the YDD staff, we will estimate the amount of dollars that's available, and so you all understand what we're considering to use as a technical support dollars is the really old federal funds that have been extended, that had the flexibility of being used for technical assistance supports, because they're not as prescriptive as the current funding that we receive from the OJDP, because after the Juvenile Justice Act was reauthorized, it affected future funding, which future funding is fiscal year 19, 20, 21, 22, and going forward. It does not allow for flexibility to use as technical assistance dollars. So what we're really dealing with a very small amount that is remaining from old funding. So we need to assess how much of it we have available and whether to dedicate all of it or a portion of it to the training. But so you all understand, it's unlikely that we will be able to support this training effort in the future using federal funds, because we just won't have the flexibility around them to support this type of work. Does it make sense?
It does, but I would also ask that we keep an eye out of technical assistant grants that come available from OJDDP to help us apply for those particular opportunities. So I think there's twofold. One is some funding, but also I know there's some ability to ask for technical assistance.
And technical assistance, I'm glad you brought it up. The OJDP is offering technical assistance for free. There is no charge. So you don't have to apply for a grant for money for them, but the assistance will be provided by the contractors that are working for the OJDP. So that's a secular thing. So for sake of timekeeping, would that be something that we can revisit at the next Juvenile Justice Committee meeting to have more information and better understanding of what is being asked and how we can support it and with how much?
Yes, I think that's the piece, is keep moving forward. And I think what I'm hearing is general support of updating and moving it forward, Sonia. And we can keep, the juvenile directors don't meet again until the 21st of this month anyway. And so just keep it moving along. I think we're in. How much we're in, we're not sure, but we're in. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, I'll let you get back to your update.
All right.
So Christina asked, is there a chance to piggyback on, we're going to find that out at the end of this month, Christina, when we're back with the Casey Foundation. I think that's exactly what will be at the forefront of our mind. And when we meet back, so the Transforming Juvenile Probation, I think everyone realizes that we were selected as one of the states through the Annie Casey Foundation and the Coalition of Juvenile Justice to do probation reform in the state of Oregon. And a team of us will be headed back to Baltimore on, that sounds fun, but feel sorry for us. We're flying on the 20th at 5 o'clock in the morning back there. And we're flying home at 5 o'clock in the morning, coming home from Baltimore 2 days later. So yes, the cringe should be what everybody is feeling, because that is going to be a tight turnaround on the 3-hour time difference. We will not ever acclimate. But so this is available, and I think Anya has sent this out. It's called a toolkit for state advisory groups around probation reform. And it really is talking about the policies and the practice and working with us as a SAG to start looking at how we're doing probation in the state of Oregon, and using our SAG to ask the questions and to invest in probation reform in Oregon. A couple things. One is Oregon does a really good job. If you'll look at the data reports, most of the youth in the state of Oregon are diverted from formal probation. Having said that, we have something in Oregon called the Formal Accountability Agreement, which is like probation light, or diet probation. So it doesn't have all of the long-term consequences of sugar, but still is based on the what you cannot do's. And so there's been a couple counties that have kind of flipped that, but that's what probation reform is going to teach us about, is the new kind of evidence-based best practices in working in juvenile justice. So if you have a copy of that book, or if you're able to just read through it, I think it would be great for us to just start having the conversations. And it may even be how we frame our agendas and how we frame the work that we do at this meeting, including figuring out really true, honest, meaningful partnerships with youth and families in our space, and specifically with youth and families from marginalized or oppressed communities who have experienced the juvenile justice system, sharing with us to understand how our decisions how different decisions could potentially have better outcomes. So I encourage that while you may not be one of the team members headed back to Baltimore, that we all kind of get the opportunity to read our little handbook and our toolkit, so that we are able to have kind of meaningful questioning conversations around what we can do here in Oregon with our dollars, our Title II dollars, maybe even frames how we partner with counties on JCP or re-engagement. One of the amazing pieces of taking Paul back to, and Brian's on here, he probably already knew this, and it was just a great like aha moment for all of us to catch on, is the intersection of lack of education engagement and juvenile justice, and how, while we think about it in YDO as separate kind of funding silos, and they are separate, they have different outcome intentionality, but the intentionality of working together across those, pretty powerful. So that is my ask for everybody, is to spend time with your toolkit, and we'll be able to, in our July meeting, share with you what we learned. Any questions? Anything that you really want to know about probation reform or about current status, like that Anya or I or Christina should have in our heads before we go back to Baltimore or Lawrence? I don't know who's all going. Is Marcella coming with us? She is, isn't she? Yeah, or Marcella?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any burning questions you guys want us to ask or learn about? We luck out. We have 2 programs that are highlighted in the toolkit that are relatively close to us. One is in Pierce County, Washington, and the other is the state of Idaho. And how they've changed their approach to working with adolescents. Okay, I'm going to take silence as thoughtful processing.
I just have to say, Molly, I don't think of super progressive when I think of Idaho. So there's my bias right there. We had somebody who joined us from Idaho, so I've heard a lot of Idaho horror stories, but I need to check my assumptions.
I'm born and raised Idaho, right? And I have those like, Idaho's going to show us up. Not that I'm competitive or anything. But in their assessment centers. So actually might look a little bit like what Clackamas County does.
Wow. Yeah, we have our own little private Idaho going on here. These not that I can comment on that. But you're welcome to come see mine if you want to skip the Idaho trip.
Yeah. Any Joy, you want to put the agenda up to make sure I'm not missing anything? Or just tell me to open it up. I have it right here.
Molly, I think you're good. I think it's just deciding when the next meeting will be, because that's going to fall during the July 4th
holiday.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if we could go either the second week of July or even August, but we did ask committee members to complete the plans reviews.
Yeah. So I would ask, maybe could we just do an hour meeting from 2 to 3 on July 10th? And the only reason I'm asking between 2 and 3 is because I know some people have conflicts between the 1 and 2 o'clock hour on Mondays standing.
Okay, and this one will be to complete the plans review and also give an update on the probation reform.
Yeah, and that would be the only 2 things that we would have on the agenda. We would keep it really tight.
Okay.
So that we keep it to an hour. I'm not seeing anyone saying no. So I'm going to take that as an opportunity to do that check-in.
Should we also have a conversation, the follow-up to the training proposal?
Yes, if we have that ready by then.
Or we can wait with this one until August because to collect more information.
My guess is that might be till August, just because I know, again, so, but if we do have it, great. If not, it'll be August.
Okay,
but we'll
sounds
just
good.
hold it to an hour at that particular time. And then I'm gonna hold a space. Thanks, Joy. We can take it down now. I got it now. You're amazing to be able to do that for it all. I'm gonna let Brian, do you have any words as right before we close for us?
I don't have any major words of wisdom. Don't get COVID in the summer.
Oh dear.
How about that?
Oh, I'm so sorry. And then I'm going to open it up to just any non-committee members who would just like to share with our committee before we close today. And Dan, you came off of screen, so it's good to see you.
Hey, how you doing, Molly?
Good.
Everyone. Hey, the only thing I wanted to just make a brief comment about is in developing training, just remember that there are counties that are like 6-7 hours away from the hubs of central Willamette Valley, Oregon. And so if trainings can be developed that can interface or interact either through, these video systems or some of the training systems that are already in use, like our county uses Relias. And I don't know how many of you know about Relias, but we adopted it after our mental health provider demonstrated it to us, and we realized, whoa, I mean, here we could get literally hundreds of trainings on everything from trauma-informed care to correctional, best practice to probation, reform to all of the fundamentals, like the things that we train on all the time in the county, bloodborne pathogens every year, all that stuff. And actually during the kind of uptick in fentanyl problems in our community, we were able to download the Oregon Health Authority training on Noxalone and then just import it into our Relias curriculum. And, all 40 of our employees from the facility in our program and our POs were able to access it, without having to come to one place at one time, which is almost impossible for us. So I just want to introduce those thoughts so folks can think about how to, make usable training so that they can really be integrated by some of these faraway departments like ours.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
The distance from the state, one corner of the state to the other is not a direct line, is it?
Yeah.
There's no 84 running through Klamath Falls.
Right. Exactly.
Anyone else? All right, guys. Again, we made it through a hefty agenda with 6 minutes to spare, and really exciting times in juvenile justice moving forward. Aside from all of the budget stuff, like I get that part, but the plans and what counties are doing, what communities are doing, exciting, setting the stage, I think, for the next set, which is bringing families and youth to our tables to have conversations. I'm super excited about that. So with that, I'm gonna say, have a great day.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Take care,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, oh.